He found out his wife was cheating with another dad from their kid's sports team. But instead of confronting her, he waited, watched, planned. Then, in a therapy session years later, he dropped a single sentence that blew up her entire facade. Cold, calculated, savage. You won't believe what he said. You know those couples who look picture perfect on the outside, the ones with 2 kids, a shiny SUV, and a calendar full of sports practices and PTA meetings. That was them, or at least that's what it looked like to everyone else. Behind closed doors, though, it was all crumbling. He was the kind of guy who'd made it. Good job, no. Great job. 6-figure income, fast promotions, polished LinkedIn profile. From the outside, you'd think he was living the dream. But when you're chasing success, something's always got to give. And for him, it was his marriage. Late nights at the office turned into early mornings on conference calls, soccer games and piano recitals, missed date nights, forgotten. His wife kept things running at home, managing the kids, the house, her own part-time job, but she was slowly fading. Not that he really noticed, or maybe he did and just didn't care anymore. He wasn't a bad guy, just tired, numb, going through the motions. The romance was gone, sure, but he figured that was just part of marriage, right? Life gets busy, sparks die. Udia, his wife, though she felt the distance hard. She tried, in small ways, leaving notes in his lunch, asking about his day, suggesting weekend getaways, but he always had an excuse. Deadlines, meetings, fatigue. Eventually, she stopped trying, started focusing on the kids, on herself, or at least that's what he thought. What he didn't see was the quiet change, the subtle smiles she gave someone else, the way she lingered a little longer at those sports practices, chatting with one particular dad who always had time to talk, a dad who listened, a dad who noticed her. She didn't mean for it to happen, at least. That's probably what she told herself. But one flirty conversation turned into coffee, then texting, then full-on affair territory. Were emotional at first, physical later, and all while she still came home to her husband and played the role of the doting wife. He found out months later, not because she told him she never did, but because he saw the messages. Her phone lit up one night while she was in the shower. Curiosity led to suspicion. Suspicion led to discovery. There it was, her entire secret world, exposed on a tiny screen. And just like that, his entire view of her shattered. Most people would have confronted her, yelled, demanded answers, filed for divorce, but Naheem, no. He did something colder, something quieter. He said nothing. Why? Well, a few reasons. First, there were the kids. Divorce would wreck them, and he knew it. Then there was the hassle, the legal battles, the gossip, the awkward work conversations. And finally, there was a part of him, Gustus Liver, that wanted to know, would she ever come clean? So, he waited, pretended he knew nothing, but he didn't forget, and he didn't forgive. Instead, he started changing. Slowly, subtly. The bedroom went cold. The kisses stopped. The eye contact faded. They became roommates, passing each other in the hall, exchanging polite words and forced smiles. She probably thought it was burnout, stress. She had no idea he knew everything. And just like that, the illusion of their perfect life stayed intact for everyone else. Neighbors waved. Friends complimented their strong marriage. The kids kept laughing. But inside that house, it was a slow, silent war. One side oblivious, the other planning. What she didn't realize was that the man she cheated on wasn't the same man who lived with her now. This new version. He was patient, ruthless, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when that moment came, oh, it was going to hurt. It all started with a notification. She was in the shower. Her phone was charging next to the bed, screen facing up. He wasn't snooping, he wasn't looking for trouble. But when that message popped up, his gut twisted. A name he didn't recognize. A heart emoji and then another one. Miss you already. He stared at it for a second, frozen. Then instinct kicked in. He picked up the phone, hands shaking but movements deliberate. He had exactly 3 minutes before she came out. Enough time to unlock it. She used the same passcode for everything and opened the message thread. What he saw didn't just confirm his worst fears. It gutted him. Hundreds of texts, some sweet, some sexual, inside jokes, pet names, mentions of stolen kisses in the parking lot after practice. One thread even talked about a weekend when he'd been out of town, a weekend she'd spent with friends, supposedly, but now he knew better. She'd been with him, the other dad, from their kid's sports team. He remembered the guy smiling, friendly, kind of over-involved in team activities. They'd even shaken hands at a few games. Shared a beer once at a barbecue. The guy had looked him in the eye while sleeping with his wife. That's when something inside him went dark. He wanted to scream, throw the phone, storm into the bathroom and drag the truth out of her, right then and there. But he didn't. Instead, he slipped the phone back into place, just as she turned off the water. He stood up, smiled, and asked if she wanted anything from the kitchen. Cold, controlled. That night, he barely slept, not from sadness but from rage. The kind that burns slow deep, the kind you can't act on right away because it's too dangerous. He lay there next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many lies she had told him with that same mouth. And the most infuriating part, she acted like nothing was wrong. Breakfast the next morning, same as always. She joked with the kids, reminded him to pick up dry cleaning, kissed him on the cheek. He fought every urge to pull away, to call her out, but he didn't. He played his part, mask on, smile tight, because if she wasn't going to confess, then it was going to make sure she paid another way. He started testing her, mentioned the other dad casually. Hey's coach Mike still doing the carpool this week. Her answer, cool as ice. Oh yeah, probably. Haven't talked to him though. He nodded and said nothing. He began collecting evidence, screenshots, phone backups, email logs. He knew the affair was over, at least physically. The other dad had taken a new job out of state and relocated, but the emotional betrayal lingered. It wasn't about the physical act, it was the deception, the years of lying, the way she cried about feeling unloved, while having someone on the side, and she never came clean. Weeks passed, then months. He waited, watching her spiral slowly. She started gaining weight, sleeping more, laughing less. Depression crept in. She said she felt unseen, wanted to reconnect, asked if he still loved her. That was rich. Still, he never said a word, never hinted that he knew, just nodded, smiled, and said, "We're both tired. Let's take things one day at a time." She suggested counseling. He declined, said work was too crazy. She didn't push. Maybe guilt made her back off, but he saw it, the cracks forming in her mask. She wasn't happy and neither was he, but only one of them was pretending ignorance. Eventually, the emotional toll of his silence started showing. The bedroom froze over completely. They hadn't touched in over a year. They spoke only when necessary. She asked him if he was cheating. He looked her dead in the eye and said, "Do you think I'd do that to you?" The irony tasted like blood. And then, like fate had a twisted sense of humor, something unexpected happened. He met someone, a co-worker, devout, no kids, smart, confident, the kind of woman who asked about his day and actually listened. Their connection was easy, effortless, and for once, he didn't feel like he had to pretend. It started with drinks, then late-night calls, then hotel rooms. She wasn't clingy, didn't want a relationship, just companionship on her terms. And it wasn't love. It was balanced justice. She didn't demand his time or ask about his family. She understood what it was, clean, honest, in a twisted way, and still ... He said nothing to his wife. He wondered what would break her. A confrontation, a divorce filing, but none of that felt satisfying. Not anymore. He didn't want chaos. He wanted her to feel it, to sit with her choices, to live inside the illusion she'd built, not knowing it was moments from crumbling. He still hadn't told a soul, not his friends, not his family, not even his affair partner. The secret was his, and his alone, a weapon. And that moment was coming. It would happen when she had least expected it. Somewhere safe, controlled, a place where she thought she'd be supported, understood. Therapy, the trap was set. He just needed her to walk into it. To the outside world, they were still the golden couple. They showed up to school functions together, posed for pictures at birthday parties, even hosted the annual Christmas dinner. Neighbors waved, family smiled. Everyone saw the two of them and thought, now that's a couple that's made it. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so bitter. Silence, he'd perfected the act. Small talk in public, polite nods at home, mechanical co-parenting in between. Every interaction was measured, deliberate, emotionally detached. She'd try to initiate conversations about the kids, about the bills, even about rekindling things, but he always found a way to shut it down without seeming cruel. It wasn't anger anymore, it was strategy. He wanted her to feel the emptiness, to notice the distance and wonder where it came from. Every unanswered touch, every dodged hug, it was all part of the punishment. And the best part, she still didn't know why. Meanwhile, his affair was humming along in the background, smooth, no drama, no demands. Just two adults finding comfort in each other's company. Sometimes they'd meet after work, other times during business trips, He didn't lie to this new woman, at least not the way he lied at home. She knew he was married, she just didn't care. She had her own life, her own rules, and no interest in fairy tales. For once he felt in control, not just of the affair, but of everything. His wife, on the other hand, was unraveling. It started with the small stuff. She stopped putting on makeup, started wearing baggy clothes around the house, left dishes in the sink. Then came the tears. Not explosive breakdowns, but quiet moments. He'd find her sitting alone, staring out the window, mascara smudged, lips trembling. She'd look at him like she wanted to say something, but she never did. He watched it all, stone-faced. She had no idea he knew, and he wasn't going to give her the relief of a confrontation. No, she didn't deserve that kind of closure. She'd made her choice years ago. He was just letting her live in it. And live in it she did. She asked to go to therapy again. This time, he said, maybe just to mess with her head. A few days later she brought it up again. He said he'd think about it. Then she told him she couldn't keep going like this. Said she felt invisible, disconnected, like roommates. The word hit differently coming from her. He told her he understood, that he didn't want to rush into anything, that he was processing a lot. It wasn't a lie, he was processing, but not what she thought. She started getting suspicious, asked more questions, wanted to go through his phone. He handed it over, calm as ever. She didn't find anything. He'd been careful, surgical. There were no text messages, no photos, no history, only a clean slate and a carefully crafted image of a man who had simply drifted away. She cried that night, told him she missed him. He nodded. I know. He slept like a baby. The days kept ticking by, school functions, grocery runs, silent dinners. They were like actors in a play, hitting their marks, delivering their lines, but feeling absolutely nothing. The kids didn't notice, or maybe they did, but didn't know how to ask. Either way, the facade held. Then came the turning point. One evening she came home from a friend's house with a new fire in her eyes. Said she'd been talking to someone who gave her clarity. She wanted to go to therapy. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now he could have said no, could have stalled, but instead, he smiled and said, okay, let's do it. And just like that, the countdown began. He knew what she thought therapy would be. A place to talk about his distance, his emotional shutdown. She thought she'd finally get to be the wounded wife, the one who gave her all and got nothing in return. She had no idea she was walking straight into the trap. He prepped for it like a business meeting.com/composed, ready to lay it all out when the time came. He didn't care about the therapist's opinion. He wasn't looking for justice or sympathy. This was about the reveal, the moment of impact. The days leading up to the session was surreal. She was almost hopeful like they were about to rebuild something. She wore makeup again, smiled a little more, packed his lunch for work. He accepted all of it with a nod and a thank you, and inside he counted the hours. The session was booked for Tuesday evening. 1 hour, neutral ground, a quiet room with beige walls, tissues on the table, and soft music playing in the background. He walked in ahead of her, sat down, waited. She arrived a minute later, breathing fast but trying to stay calm. The therapist welcomed them, gave a little speech about honesty, communication, vulnerability, and then it began. The therapist turned to her and asked her to stop, and she did. Boy, did she. She talked about how alone she felt, how hard she tried to hold things together, how distant he'd become, how she never felt like a priority. She cried. She painted herself as the loyal wife who'd stayed through the storms, the great mom. She went on for 10 straight minutes. He said nothing. Then the therapist turned to him and asked, how do you feel about what your wife just shared? He smiled and said, let's cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase. That was the sentence that shattered everything. The therapist blinked. His wife froze mid-sniffle, her eyes locking onto his. She looked confused, hurt even. But he wasn't done. She can tell you about the affair she had 2 years ago, he said coolly, and then I'll tell you about mine. And after that, maybe we can all grab dinner. The room went silent, deafening, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. His wife's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The therapist turned to her slowly, clearly caught off guard. Is that true? She asked gently. And there it was. The moment he'd waited for. She couldn't lie her way out of this. Not in front of someone trained to spot deception. Not when the air had been sucked from the room and all eyes were on her. All she could do was sit there trembling and whisper. Yes, it felt surreal. For 2 years he had carried this secret. Waited, watched, let her believe she was the only one hurting. And now, it was all out. No throwing things, just facts, cold and clean. But what she didn't know was that this bomb wasn't just about payback. It was the prelude to something deeper, because by the time she'd cheated, he was already gone. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Her betrayal had pushed him over the edge, but it wasn't the start of the end. It was just the final nail. And out of the ashes of that silence came something unexpected. Someone unexpected. Her name was Jenna, a senior analyst from another division, transferred to his branch 6 months after the discovery. Tall, sharp-witted, no-nonsense. She wasn't the type to flirt, and definitely not the type to entertain drama. That's probably what drew him in. She didn't need him. She didn't want anything from him, at least, not at first. They started talking during late meetings, then walking out to the parking lot together. Then came after-hours texts, nothing inappropriate, just banter, teasing, two professionals letting off steam. But beneath that surface was chemistry. Unspoken, inevitable. One night, after a particularly stressful week, they met at a rooftop bar. Drinks turned into real conversation. Real conversation turned into a cab ride. The cab ride led to a hotel. And that's where everything changed. It wasn't like it had been with his wife. With Jenna there were no strings, no expectations. She wasn't looking for a relationship, and neither was he. She was divorced, child-free, and very clear about her boundaries. "We don't ask about home," she told him. "We don't do holidays. We don't fall in love." And he respected that. Their affair was the opposite of chaos. It was predictable, structured, even therapeutic in its own twisted way. They met when they wanted, texted when they could, and when the moments ended, they walked away without baggage. But what mattered most, for the first time in years, he felt seen. Jenna didn't judge, didn't pry. She laughed at his dark jokes, listened without offering empty sympathy. When he told her his marriage was dead, she didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "Then stop living in it." She was the perfect mirror to his situation, detached, rational, fiercely independent, and in a strange way, that gave him back something he'd lost. Not love, not even hope, just clarity. The more he saw Jenna, the less bitterness he felt toward his wife. Not forgiveness, never that, but perspective. He started realizing that while she'd betrayed him first, they had both been emotionally absent long before that. The marriage was a shell, and neither of them wanted to admit it. Back home, things stayed cold. After that therapy session, there was no more pretending. She tried to apologize, cried, said she wanted to start over. He just looked at her and said, "We can't build something on lies." He didn't move out. Not yet. The kids were still young and he wanted to avoid legal chaos, but he made it clear. Their marriage was over in everything but name. She agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. They became ghosts, sharing a space. And through it all, Jenna remained his anchor. She never asked for more, never pressured him, just showed up when he needed her, vanished when he didn't. It was clean, honest, and most importantly, it was his choice that mattered more than anything. Because for so long, he'd felt powerless, first to his job, then to his failing marriage, then to his wife's betrayal. But now, he was writing the script, on his terms, and the beauty of it, she still had no idea who Jenna was. No names, no faces, just the vague sting of knowing she wasn't the only one who'd strayed and that her own lies had finally cost her the moral high ground. He didn't gloat, didn't rub it in, just lived. Jenna eventually moved on, got a promotion, and transferred again. They ended things amicably. No drama, no fallout. She thanked him for being honest. He thanked her for the clarity. It was exactly what it needed to be. Temporary, but the lessons, those stay. He realized that revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, it's about distance, about reclaiming your narrative, about standing still while the person who wronged you spins out. And now, for the first time in years, he wasn't spinning. After the therapy session, the house changed. It was quieter, yes, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the heavy, haunted kind, the kind that hangs in the air like smoke after something's burned down. They still shared the same roof, still handled school runs and grocery shopping like clockwork, but the pretense had vanished. Everything was transactional now. For her, the illusion was shattered. The moment he exposed her affair in front of the therapist, it was like the ground beneath her feet crumbled. All the control she thought she had, the narrative she'd built about being the wounded wife, the one who tried so hard, was gone, and it showed. She started unraveling. Her appearance changed first. The effort she used to put into her hair, her clothes, her makeup, gone. Baggy sweatshirts became her uniform. She stopped going out unless it was absolutely necessary. Friends started noticing. She made excuses. Work's been rough, or just focusing on the kids. But the truth, she was spiraling. Depression crept in like fog. She slept more, ate less, or sometimes binged when no one was watching. Her weight, her skin dulled. That confident woman who once lit up every room now barely made eye contact in her own kitchen. And yet, she still couldn't say the words. He waited, gave her the space to confess, to apologize fully, to show real remorse. But she never did. "Oh," she cried. She mumbled vague things like, "I made mistakes," or "I wasn't myself back then." But she never fully owned it. Never once looked him in the eyes and said, "I cheated, I betrayed you." Even after the therapy session blew it wide open, she clung to denial, not about what happened but about what it meant. She wanted to believe they could rebuild, that maybe if she just endured the silence long enough, he'd come back around, that maybe the affair could be chalked up to a rough patch. She was wrong, because what she didn't understand was this. The affair hadn't just broken his trust, it had changed him. The man she cheated on, he was gone. This version of him didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't try to fix things. He didn't even care enough to be angry anymore. He was calm, distant, focused. She was still mourning a marriage that, to him, had died years ago. And the most brutal part, he treated her with politeness. Not love, not hatred, just ... courtesy. It was never cruel. He didn't yell. He didn't throw her infidelity in her face. But he also never let her forget. Not with words, just with indifference. He stopped texting her unless it was about the kids. Stopped watching shows with her. Stopped sitting next to her on the couch. They shared a home, but not a life. The kids noticed. At first they asked questions. "Why don't you and Mommy sit together anymore?" He kept things vague. "Mommy and I are just working on things." But kids aren't stupid. They felt the tension, the cold air between warm smiles. She tried to re-engage. He suggested family trips, movie nights, even a second round of counseling. He declined each time, gently but firmly. "It's too late for that," he'd say. And every time, she'd flinch. What truly haunted her wasn't just that she'd been caught. It was that she'd been outmaneuvered. She thought she held all the cards. That her affair was safely in the past, buried under time and domestic routine. She thought the emotional narrative favored her until he flipped the table. Not with rage, but with timing, precision. She didn't just lose him, she lost the story, and that loss started to hollow her out. Friends began pulling away, not because he told anyone, he never did, but because she changed. She was no longer vibrant, social, confident. She was withdrawn, anxious, jumpy. Some people probably assumed he had done something, that maybe he'd shut her out unfairly, but most just stopped asking questions. She tried to reclaim some sense of control. Started attending church again, joined a local book club, even began seeing a new therapist privately. But it didn't help, not really, because no matter how many distractions she threw at the void, she still had to come home. To him, and every quiet dinner was a reminder that she broke something she couldn't fix, a reminder that he knew everything, and a reminder that he'd moved on emotionally, if not legally, while she was still trapped in the wreckage. There were nights when she sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, just staring into the dark. He knew. He saw her, but he never asked what she was thinking, because he already knew. Guilt, regret, confusion, loneliness. She had it all now, and yet she still never said the one thing that could have made a difference. "I'm sorry." And by the time she realized that, it was far, far too late. There's a moment in every dying relationship where the silence becomes unbearable. Not the kind that screams in anger, but the kind that whispers, "This is it. There's no coming back." For them, that moment came on a Thursday night. The kids had gone to bed early. He was on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work, but really just scanning news articles to avoid eye contact. She stood in the hallway for a while, hovering like she wanted to say something. And then, finally, she did. "We can't keep living like this." He didn't look up. I agree. That threw her off. She expected resistance, maybe even a fight. But all she got was calm acceptance. That's when the panic started creeping into her voice. "I'm serious," she said. "We either need to fix this, or we need to end it." He closed the laptop, set it on the coffee table, and looked at her, really looked at her. "There's nothing to fix." The words hit like a slap. She blinked fast, trying to hold back tears. "So, that's it. We just keep pretending. For how long?" He leaned back in the chair, arms folded, voice steady. "I'm not pretending. I've been real with you since that therapy session. We're done. We're just waiting for what? For you to stop pretending we still have something worth saving." Silence. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. He wasn't trying to hurt her, he just wasn't protecting her anymore. And that's what broke her, not the betrayal, not the distance, but the total emotional detachment. the realization that she was the only one still holding on to a fantasy. She sat down across from him, hands shaking. Then let's get a divorce. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. He nodded. If that's what you want. What I want, she snapped, voice rising. Do you think I want this? I wanted a husband who gave a damn. I wanted. He cut her off, calm but firm. You wanted someone else, and you got him. For a while she froze. The venom in her throat dried up. There it was again, that cold truth. The one she couldn't argue with. He hadn't thrown it in her face in months, but now that it was back, it landed even harder. Because this time, it wasn't said in anger, it was just a fact. And facts are harder to fight than feelings. She stood up, pacing now. I made a mistake, okay, but I was lonely. You weren't there. You were never there. And yet I'm still the one here, he said, gesturing around the room. Still showing up. Still raising the kids, still paying the bills. I never stopped being here. I just stopped being yours. That hit deep. She sat down again, suddenly deflated. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what to do. For the first time in months, he said, just a little. You don't have to do anything, he said. We'll go through the motions. We'll protect the kids. We'll end this clean, quiet, no screaming. No lawyers who want to make it messy. She nodded slowly. We're really doing this. We already are. She wiped her face with her sleeve. And what about you? Are you seeing someone? The question hung in the air. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the wall for a moment. Then, without looking at her, he said, it doesn't matter. That answer hurt more than a yes ever could, because it told her everything she needed to know. He'd moved on, maybe not with someone else, but from her. And in that moment, something inside her cracked for good. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood up, nodded, and walked upstairs. He sat there long after she was gone, staring into the silence. This wasn't victory. This was the final chapter of a long, brutal story, and it ended not with fireworks, but with a quiet admission that there was nothing left. No redemption arc, no reconciliation. Just two people who broke something so completely, all they could do now was make sure the wreckage didn't hurt anyone else, and that was the real breaking point. The appointment was at 6 p.m. sharp. A neutral, beige-toned office in a quiet corner of town, a soft couch, calming music, a bookshelf filled with titles like The 5 Love Languages and Hold Me Tight. Everything about the place screamed reconciliation, healing, second chances. But that's not what he came for. He wasn't here to patch things up. He wasn't here to forgive or forget. He was here to end it. His wife sat beside him, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Her nerves were obvious. She was hopeful, desperate even. She thought this was the beginning of a new chapter, that maybe, finally, he was ready to try to fix things, to meet her halfway. She had no idea what was coming. The therapist, clearly well practiced in handling emotional meltdowns, welcomed them warmly and asked the usual opening question. So, what brings you both here today? His wife jumped in like she'd been waiting for that moment for months. She launched into a monologue, tearful, poetic, manipulative in all the ways that sound sincere. She spoke about disconnection, about how the love faded, how lonely she felt. She painted herself as the woman who had held the family together while her husband drifted. She talked about the roommate dynamic, about the lost intimacy, about wanting her partner back. 10 minutes straight, no pauses. She cried halfway through, pulled tissues from the box like they were props in her performance. The therapist nodded sympathetically, offering the soft encouragement of someone who thought they were seeing a marriage on the brink of repair. Then the room fell silent. The therapist turned to him, her eyes soft. And how do you feel about what your wife just shared? He didn't cry. He didn't tremble. He smiled just a little and said, let's cut to the chase. The air changed. The room tensed. His wife's face went pale. He continued, his voice calm, even bored. She can start by telling you about the affair she had 2 years ago, with a dad from our kids' sports team. Then we can talk about the one I'm having now. After that, maybe we can go get dinner. I'm starving. Silence, the kind of silence that swallows sound. The therapist blinked, stunned. His wife gaped at him, mouth open, no words coming out. He turned to her slowly. No, not ready to start. That's fine. I've got the messages, the screenshots, the emails, dates, times. I've been saving them for a while. Her face collapsed into her hands. I didn't know you knew. I figured, he said. That's why this has been so fun. The therapist tried to intervene, voice trembling slightly. Let's take a breath. No, he cut in, eyes still on his wife. She's been hiding it for 2 years. I think it's time she finally says it out loud. His wife sobbed, broken, whispering, I was lonely. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did, he said. And you never said a word. Not once. Not even when you saw me breaking. You let me think it was all my fault. I was scared. No, he said, voice rising for the first time. You were selfish. You had options. You could have talked to me. You could have ended things, but instead you lied. Every day, for years, the therapist tried to guide the session back to calm ground, suggesting they explore the emotions behind the betrayal. But he wasn't there for therapy. He was there to rip off the mask. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. You wanted to know why I shut down? Why the bedroom went cold? Why I didn't kiss you goodnight anymore? It's because every time I looked at you, I saw a liar. And the worst part, you didn't even have the decency to feel guilty. You thought you got away with it. She was sobbing now, hunched over in her chair. The therapist handed her tissues, speaking in soft tones, trying to diffuse the explosion, but the damage was done. The room was radioactive, and then, just as suddenly, he calmed again, leaned back, smoothed his shirt sleeve. I'm not here to punish you, he said. I already did that, quietly, for 2 years. I watched you unravel while you thought you were still in control. That was enough for me. The therapist looked between them, unsure what to say. His wife wiped her eyes. So, what now? He shrugged. We stop pretending. We tell the kids something age appropriate. We start dividing assets. We agree on custody. We make this clean, efficient, because there's nothing left to fight for. Her voice cracked. Did you love her? He shook his head. No, I didn't love her. Big difference. She nodded slowly, defeated. I thought we had more time. You had 2 years, he said. You used them to bury the truth. I used them to plan my exit. The therapist finally spoke again, gently. Would you consider one more session to talk about the transition? For the children, he nodded. For them, sure. His wife just sat there, shaking, broken. Not because she'd been yelled at, but because he hadn't. There were no revenge fantasy carried out with drama, just cold truth, the most painful kind. As they stood to leave, she reached out instinctively, maybe out of habit, maybe desperation. He stepped back. Don't, he said quietly. That part of us is gone. And then he walked out, leaving her standing there, holding nothing but the pieces. The fallout wasn't loud. No slammed doors, no custody battles, no dramatic Facebook announcements. It was quiet, almost surgical. After the therapy session, they didn't fight. They didn't scream. They barely even spoke. The war had already been fought in silence. Every missed kiss, every cold dinner, every unspoken accusation. All that was left was division, assets, parenting time, paperwork. They started sleeping in separate rooms. He took the guest bedroom without a word. She never asked him to come back. The kids noticed, of course. Kids always do. But he was ready for that. They sat down, together, united for once, and gave the softest version of the truth. Mom and Dad have decided we're better as friends. We still love you more than anything. That's never going to change. There were tears, confusion, but no explosions. The kids adjusted faster than expected, maybe because the tension that had gripped the house for so long was finally gone. She moved out 3 months later, into a modest apartment 10 minutes away. He helped her carry boxes, not because he still loved her, but because the kids were watching. Because there was no point in adding spite to something already so broken. They agreed on joint custody, split everything down the middle. No lawyers dragging things out, no courtroom drama, just two people who knew they had failed and refused to make their kids pay for it. Still, the emotional rubble remained. For her it came in waves. Regret, shame, the realization that she had gambled everything and lost. She tried to re-enter the dating world, but her heart wasn't in it. Every new faith reminded her of the one she destroyed. For him, freedom felt strange at first. He had all this space physically, emotionally, no one asking him where he was going, no one waiting for him to come home. The silence that used to suffocate now felt peaceful, liberating. He started cooking again, hit the gym, traveled for work without checking in. He even deleted the hidden folder of screenshots and evidence he'd kept for years. He didn't need it anymore. The game was over. He'd already won. And the affair, that ended too, not out of guilt, but because it had served its purpose. Jenna got promoted and moved cities. They said goodbye without drama, just mutual respect. She thanked him for being honest. He thanked her for reminding him what clarity looked like. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. He didn't rush into anything new, didn't jump on dating apps or seek validation. Instead, he rebuilt, quietly, brick by brick, not for anyone else, just for himself. He reconnected with old friends, took the kids camping, started going on solo hikes, read books he'd forgotten he owned, slept better than he had in a decade. And bit by bit, The bitterness faded. Not completely, but enough. Every now and then, he'd see his ex at a school event. They'd exchange polite words, keep it civil for the kids, but there was always a shadow between them, an unspoken truth that neither of them could fully shake. That she had cheated, and he had waited. That she had lied, and he had exposed her. That she had tried to rewrite the story, and he'd burned the whole book. And yet, he didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hating her would mean she still held power. But she didn't. Not over his time. Not over his peace. Not over his heart. He'd taken it all back. That was the real revenge, not the therapy bombshell, not the silent treatment, not the affair. It was the freedom, the ability to look her in the eye and feel nothing. No longing, no resentment, no what-ifs, just peace. And that's what she never saw coming. Because she thought she'd win by being the first to cheat. She thought silence meant forgiveness. She thought therapy would be her redemption arc. But he rewrote the ending. Not with rage, with patience. And now he was free. There's a kind of victory that doesn't need applause. No clapping, no cheering, just quiet satisfaction. A stillness that says, I survived. And I did it on my terms. That's the kind of victory he earned. Months passed. Seasons changed. His home no longer felt like a battlefield, it felt like a sanctuary. No more walking on eggshells, no more pretending to feel what wasn't there. Just peace, the kind you only recognize after years of noise. He learned to enjoy the little things again. A silent morning coffee before the kids woke up. A clean kitchen, music that didn't remind him of arguments. Weekends with his children that were filled with laughter instead of tension. No more hidden truths, no more fake smiles. Just genuine moments. His ex tried to stay relevant in small ways. A text here, a comment there. But he kept it courteous, never cruel. He knew anything more would only reopen wounds, not just hers, but his too. So he stayed civil, not because he owed her kindness, but because he owed himself peace. He never told the kids about her affair, never poisoned their perception of their mother. That was a line he refused to cross. Some things, he decided, didn't need to be said. They'd grow up and form their own opinions, that was enough. And every now and then, when they were at her place, he found himself alone in the house, truly alone. At first it was strange. The silence was louder than he expected, but then it became something else entirely, a gift. A moment to reflect, breathe, and exist without having to answer to anyone. He didn't fill that space with meaningless flings or desperate distractions. He didn't chase love. He let life unfold slowly. He learned how to be alone without being lonely. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful part of all. Because for years, he thought revenge meant evening the score. Hurt for hurt, betrayal for betrayal. But now, he understood the truth. Real revenge isn't rage. It isn't shouting or slamming doors. It's clarity. It's walking away with your dignity intact. It's letting someone drown in the mess they made while you sail calmly into something better. His ex, she was still stuck in the storm. Still trying to explain her choices to people who weren't even asking anymore. Still wondering how he found out. When. How long he knew. Who else he told. Still waiting for the redemption arc that would never come. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was living. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not because he got even. Because he got out. Out of the lies. Out of the cold. Out of a life built on broken promises. And the beauty of it, no one saw it coming. There were no dramatic exits, no fireworks. Just a man who endured in silence, and then chose freedom over fire. That was his quiet victory. And it was everything. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about getting loud, it's about walking away with your head high while they crumble in their own lies. If this story struck a nerve, smash that like button. Subscribe for more savage real life takedowns, and tell us in the comments what's your version of quiet revenge.